Craig.
Hey, Craig.
Hey, Craig.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. This time we're talking all things Yuki Tsunoda, Japanese driver for the Alpha Tauri team. On the episode, we have Ito, Casey, and myself, Chelsea, and I'm just going to start us off with a bit of background about his early life. So, Yuki Tsunoda is a young Japanese Formula One racing driver who has been in racing in one form or another since he was 6 years old. He first found his interest for Formula One when he started karting at a really young age. You see, he started at 4 years old because he used to watch his father compete in a local racing series known as the Nakai Inner Circuit. Now, born in Sagamihara, Japan on November 5th, 2000, and is the 18th Japanese driver to compete in Formula One after Kobayashi in 2014. His early years were honestly pretty impressive, and he ended up being champion in almost every series, but we're going to get into that later. Now, he started his karting career in 2010 when Yuki joined the JAF Junior Karting Championship. Now, if you didn't know, in Japan, the karting world is nothing like the one you'll find in Europe. So because of this, many drivers will move from Asia to Europe. Yuki, though, stuck with his odds in Japan and thankfully did pretty well with JAF. Now, JAF is the Japan Automobile Federation Junior Series. This is their version of the Junior Kart Championship and is also a feeder series to what their higher series are, which is KF2 and KF1. It's 5 races before the season finale in Suzuka, which we'll see this weekend, and each event is scheduled across 2 days. We have free practice on day 1, followed by a final free practice, a time trial, a pre-final qualifying race, and the final race on day 2. Championship points are awarded in the final race only based on final race classification. Now, he quickly moved up the ranks, making it to the regional class by 2013 and the national class by 2014. His quick movement in the series is definitely why he got some good looks, because we saw him go on to the Honda Formula Dream project, which Ito can tell us more about.
Yes. So in 2016, Yuki graduated from the Honda-sponsored Suzuka Circuit Racing School. The school is there to provide aspiring racers with the tools to succeed in whatever motorsport they desire. Their website literally states, cultivating human resources who can compete for podiums at world's top level. And I mean, Yuki's up there, so yay. Upon graduating, he further strengthened his Honda ties by joining the Honda Formula Dream project, which, much like the driving school, Yuki was part of the Honda pipeline. So it's no surprise that being part of the Dream project allowed him to make his Japanese Formula 4 debut at one of their one-off races in Suzuka, where actually this week's Japanese Grand Prix will be held. Racing for the Suzuka racing team, he was able to stun right off the bat by coming in second in the first race and narrowly missing the podium in fourth for the second race. This, however, was enough for him to move on to his first full season of single-seater racing, which Casey will tell us more about.
So in 2017, Yuki competed in 2 single-seater championships at the same time, both with the Honda Formula Dream project team. The first was the JAF F4 Japanese Championship in the East Regional Division. There was an East and a West Division. And despite it using the F4 name, it is run by the Japan Automobile Federation, like the karting organization that kind of Yuki went through. So in his first season of single-seater racing, he actually won the Eastern Division in the JAF Championship. And he simultaneously competed in the FIA F4 Japanese Championship, which, despite sounding similar, is different. And despite there being almost 48 drivers competing at some point during the season, and it being his rookie year, Yuki takes a commendable third place against the defending champion Ritomo Miata in first, and his teammate, who is very experienced with single-seaters, racer Ukyo Sasahara in second. During the season, he had 3 wins, 6 podiums, and 4 pole positions. But this was just the start for Yuki. In 2018, he competed again in the FIA F4 Japanese Championship with the Honda Formula Dream project, but this time he was able to win the championship, even getting 5 wins in a row out of his 7 total wins. Yuki's impressive performance led him to a seat in the Formula 3 Championship, which Chelsea will talk more about.
Honestly, we can thank Red Bull for the butterfly effect we're about to see with Yuki's future career, because during 2018 is when we saw Honda and Red Bull form ties after Red Bull dropped the Renault engine. So this caused Yuki, who was already in the Honda program, to also join the Red Bull Junior program. Aside from both programs, he joined the Genzer Motorsport team for the newly announced FIA Formula 3 Championship. By his first race, he was already scoring a point finish in 10th place at Barcelona, and would keep the trend going until Austria, where he failed to gain points. He did have a great comeback for the rest of the season, though, getting points in Silverstone, Budapest, Japan, and Monza. So that season included 3 podiums and 1 win, landing him 9th in the championship, and honestly responsible for all those Genzer's team's points during the season. Like his earlier moves, his work on the grid was getting noticed as a consistent point finisher, and we saw him get brought on to the Euro Formula Open, which Casey has all of the info for.
So now it's 2019, and this is Yuki's first full year where he's backed by Red Bull, as well as Honda, and a part of their junior driver development program. And this year he's competing with Moto Park Racing. He had a strong start at the Euro Formula Open, coming in second in the first race of the season. However, up and down results over the rest of the season and missed rounds at the Red Bull Ring and Silverstone due to his F3 commitment meant he finished the year 4th with 151 points, 1 win, and 5 podiums. Now in 2020, Yuki heads to a completely different part of the world, over to New Zealand, to compete in the Castrol Toyota Racing Series with M2 competition. He is teammates with reigning 2019 champion and future temporary teammate who we just saw score his first points in Singapore, Liam Lawson. So they were already teammates before. And Yuki wins 1 race this season and takes 4th in the 2020 championship.
And let's just say it was a busy 2020 for him, because he didn't just race in New Zealand, but also in early 2020, Honda announced that Yuki will race with Carlin in F2 that season, together with Jehan Daruvala, another Red Bull Junior. Now, of course, because it was 2020, COVID caused a reshuffle of the calendar, meaning that he would make his first appearance in Austria in July. While practice in Austria went well, and it saw him top the timing sheets, the rest of the weekend was sadly forgettable, as he qualified 12th and collided with his teammate on the opening lap of the race on Saturday, causing him to finish last. Thankfully, he was able to recover somewhat on Sunday by finishing 11th. On the other hand, his second weekend in Austria saw him get his first pole. Looks like he learned from his previous weekend. He led most of the race on Saturday under wet conditions, but would ultimately end up second after dropping to 4th for a bit due to a botched pit stop. After disappointments in the sprint, as well as both races in Hungary, he managed to make a comeback for the feature race in Silverstone, qualifying 9th, but ultimately racing past Christian Lundgaard on the last lap to end up on the podium. Sadly, the sprint wasn't as lucky. Honestly, what is it with Yuki and F2 sprints at this point? However, just like in Austria, the second weekend at Silverstone worked out better for him than the first, coming in 6th in the feature race and, drumroll please, taking home his maiden victory at the sprint race due to the 2 Prema cars taking each other out. Though he did say post-race that he could have won without their help. Spa saw him get his second pole of the season, just ahead of Nikita Mazepin, and while he didn't finish the race in second due to being pushed wide by Mazepin, he would ultimately be promoted to race winner due to the penalty Mazepin received for that incident. Next up, Monza. It saw him qualify second, ultimately finishing in fourth for the feature race, and seemingly like a harbinger of what was to come in F1, he had to retire from the sprint due to mechanical issues. Mugello, the weekend after, was sadly one to forget as well, as he finished 16th and 20th respectively due to collisions with Dan Ticktum and Felipe Drugovich respectively. Russia saw him get another pole, which he sadly couldn't convert into a win as he was overtaken by Mick Schumacher. That and a sixth-place finish in the sprint, however, was enough for him to be third in the standings before the final two rounds in Bahrain. Round 1 in Bahrain saw him charge from 20th due to a spin on his flying lap all the way to 6th. Very impressive, honestly. Sadly, though, he wasn't as lucky for the sprint that weekend as punctures caused him to drop to 15th. But as usual, the second weekend at a circuit worked its magic. The week after, he would take pole, and after a heated battle with Mazepin, would end up on the top step, following that up with a second-place finish in the sprint. And can I just say thank God for that second round in Bahrain? Then 3 wins, 4 pole positions, and finishing third overall in the F2 standings with 200 points all meant that he would get that coveted F1 seat for the next season.
Now, that seat was in AlphaTauri, partnering with Pierre Gasly after Daniel Kvyat was let go from the team. Yuki, honestly, he had a pretty good start with the partnership. He even got 9th in his first race in Bahrain. But the problem was he was a bit of a wild card, and he had a temper. So because of this, he would have some crazy good races, good overtakes, and he was even called F1's best rookie for years by Ross Brawn, which is Formula One's technical director. But he wasn't consistent. He ended up scoring points in 6 races and earned a best finish of 4th place in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. But it was still a wild season. He crashed and spun out at the Italy Grand Prix in separate races, so quali and race day. He got in trouble for asking if Pierre and himself had the same car. He crashed at Azerbaijan before getting back in the race. He crashed in quali at the French Grand Prix. And honestly, a few more things that I'm not going to list because he just had a solid amount of bad luck that season. But here's the wild card I mentioned. He wasn't bad either. He was reaching Q3 a solid amount of times. He was pretty good at overtaking and defending. He got points in 7 races, and he did earn 4th in Abu Dhabi, so he was able to surpass Pierre, and he ended the season 14th in the Drivers' Championship. Now, while he did only end the championship with 32 points, I don't think that's horrible for a rookie year. And they liked him enough to keep him on for the next season, which Casey talks about.
Yep, like Chelsea said, Yuki stays with AlphaTauri alongside his teammate Pierre Gasly for the 2022 season. And he starts off his second season with the team pretty strong with an 8th place finish at the first race in Bahrain. But that is followed by Saudi Arabia with him not even being able to set a qualifying time, and then not even being able to start the race due to a power unit failure on the way to the grid. This is actually pretty similar to what just happened to him at Monza, where the car just kind of broke before the race even started. So it seems like bad luck has just been following him his entire time in F1. And Yuki actually describes the 2022 Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix as one of the best of his career, starting from 16th and managing to overtake Sebastian Vettel late in the race to take P7. In Miami, he makes his first Q3 appearance of the season, but unfortunately fails to take any points in the race. After finally getting points at the Spanish Grand Prix, Yuki would then go 12 consecutive races without scoring a point, mainly due to mechanical failures and/or crashes. This turns around at Coda, where after starting 19th, he drives his way up to 10th, breaking his points drop, but scoring his final point of the season. He finished 2022 17th in the Drivers' Championship, but he would remain in F1 for the 2023 season.
Yes, and while this year started off with him no longer being considered the rookie of the team, thanks to the departure of Pierre Gasly from the team and Nick de Vries joining the team, that would very quickly change, even before the summer, as Nick was replaced by Daniel Ricciardo. And even though Daniel was supposed to have that seat for the rest of the season, a injury at the Dutch GP meant that he once again got a new teammate in Liam Lawson. And honestly, that teammate musical chairs was fun. But besides the teammate, he's doing pretty well, I'd say. He's had 3 points so far for the season from Australia, Baku, and Belgium, where he got three 10th place finishes. Sadly, though, even though he has those 3 points to his name right now, in Monza, he didn't start due to an engine failure on the formation lap, and then in Singapore, he didn't even finish his first lap due to, once again, engine issues. And honestly, I hope his luck turns around, because there is a rumor still going around that there is a Yuki contract extension coming any day. But with the musical chairs going on at Alpha Tauri right now, we don't 100% know this, because there's 3 potential drivers and only 2 seats.
I wanted to say there are 4 potential drivers just because I like to think that Red Bull and AlphaTauri are kind of like the same team. So it is also possible that we could see Checo kicked out of there. Danny moved back up to Red Bull at some point, and Liam Lawson put in for with Yuki. That's a lot of musical chairs, but I think it would look good. I don't know, makes sense in my head. I like Yuki a lot. I think his temper has gotten way better in how he like handles himself in races, because I used to love watching him on DTS, and he always was yelling just constantly. And while it was really entertaining, I could also acknowledge that's not someone you want as a driver for your team. So I'm happy he's kind of figured it out. And I hope that we do end up seeing more information come out for the contract.
I definitely agree that him having chilled out, because I remember, I think it was in DTS that they said this, but I'm not 100% sure. But he apparently learned English from mechanics, and all know how mechanics talk. So that could contribute to his, I want to say, colorful language on the radio. But yeah, he's definitely chilled out, and I feel like, because I know that pre this season, a lot of people were like, "Oh no, Pierre's leaving the team. Yuki's not going to be able to fill the like big brother in quotation marks shoes of not being the rookie on the team anymore." But I feel like he's truly stepped up.
I mean, yeah, for sure, especially since this is the first year where he was kind of the lead driver. And honestly, that's why I think him and Liam works well, is because Liam's also actually younger than him. Because both Nick and Danny are still, they're older, they're very experienced. So with Liam, it's someone he's worked with before. And it's also someone he can finally be, the older driver, the big brother. Because I feel that it's kind of weird, probably, if you're the most experienced driver with the team, but then Danny Rick's in his 30s, and Yuki's still really, really young. So, but I mean, honestly, Red Bull and AlphaTauri, I guess, have, at least it's a good problem where you have like 4 really good drivers and you just don't have enough seats, or, decent, good drivers, that deserve to be in F1, but there's just not enough seats.
It's not fair. Let's start with that. Y'all technically got 4 seats on the circuit. But anyways, I will say, I think the problem is there are too many talented people, like right now, just in this time of racing, because I know F2 has a few people that we can definitely see them going to F1, or we would love to see them go towards F1, but it's like, where are they going to go? Like, who on the circuit right now is really going to leave in the next few years? We have like one of the youngest circuits right now. It's like all of them right now are there to stay. Maybe some of them have plans to retire in the next 5 years, because I know Max is like, if I win a few more championships, he's going to keep getting bored and then he's going to leave. I don't know if Lance is going to stay much longer, just because the guy seems to like tennis. That's cool. Do whatever you want. And then there are just people there that they're good, but how good are they going to stay when there's people like, an F2 like Liam Lawson that should have a seat, I think, on F1. And it sucks because you love all of these drivers. And it's like, when do you decide that we should maybe push certain drivers out to push some new ones in? Because that's not really a thing we do. But if all the drivers are young and no one plans to retire, then you're just going to have the same circuit for a while.
Agreed. And I feel like that's a very Red Bull junior team problem, because their junior team is huge. Like, they have so many drivers in F2 and F3 right now. I think currently in the Red Bull junior program in F2 alone, it's 4 drivers. And rationally, not all 4 drivers are going to make it. I mean, they already had to send Liam to Super Formula in Japan to hone his racecraft, but also because there was no space for him in F1 this season. So I totally agree with you, ladies.
Yeah, and I think that's why it would be great to see 2 more teams in F1, because that means 4 more spots, and maybe we could see some reshuffling. Love to see Yuki make it to the 2024 season, because I think that's when the craziness is going to happen, because so many contracts are up in 2024. And, with Red Bull's partnership with Honda kind of ending come 2026, perhaps he might want to, make some moves, follow in Pierre's footsteps, leave the Red Bull family, and kind of do his own thing.
I'm not going to lie. The second you said him follow Pierre, I was like, well, it's done pretty well for Pierre and Alex. They have both living the dream after leaving Red Bull. So, I don't know. I think Yuki is a good driver. I think he's a bit temperamental still, because you still hear it on the radios. Like, he'll tell his guy to, like, F off or something in a different way. He doesn't actually say F off. Actually, I think he might have one time. But anyways, something else to keep in mind, I guess, when it comes to Yuki's contract, because 2024 is also going to be interesting, because, yeah, they're going to open 4 seats, but that doesn't mean it's going to be for the people already on the grid. That can be for those F2 kiddos that are like, I'm ready to rumble and get me on there.
And I think Red Bull was not expecting Liam to do as well as he is. I think they were like, they got Daniel and they're like, okay, awesome. We got Yuki and Daniel. And then Daniel hurt his hand and they had to bring in Liam. And then now it's like, oh, wait, Liam's doing really well. So it's like they got 3 people. And I think they did not kind of expect that to be coming.
Here's the thing. And I had this conversation with one of my friends, and I was like, I feel like people are ignoring this. Liam Lawson is absolutely obsessed with Singapore. That kid probably knows that map. Like, if he was sleeping, knocked out, unconscious, he could probably still drive it, right? Because he was obsessed with it that much growing up. So to me, it kind of makes sense that would be a race that he does so well in. And I'm still honestly shocked, like, amazing driving, but it made sense in my head because I was like, yeah, that's his race. So I want to see now, because I know he's going to take over for Danny, if I'm not wrong, in Suzuka. If we're going to see maybe, Yuki fight a little harder, or maybe Danny lose his seat, because if Danny keeps, honestly, I want Danny to recover, but if he keeps missing races and Liam keeps kicking ass, Red Bull is going to be like, that looks like a good one to keep.
I mean, on the note of Singapore, I saw this tidbit while I was reading race coverage and stuff, and apparently Liam begged his dad to take him to the Singapore race ever since he was a little kid. The dad said, every year, we're gonna go. Never happened. And in an interview, he said, I was so excited when I was able to take them this year. And that to me is just, it shows how precious he is, but also how dedicated to Singapore he is. And I mean, honestly, for the rest of the season, while I do think Danny will be back after Suzuka, especially because if he's not, Liam will have a scheduling conflict come Mexico. So, with Super Formula. And so, while Mexico's still ways away, but if he's not ready by Mexico, they're going to have to bring in Nick DeVries again because you're only allowed 4 different drivers on a team per season. Just let that sink in.
I love Formula One. This shit is so dramatic sometimes. It's like a novela. To me, Yuki, I think, is good. Like, he's one of those people on the team right now that I'm like, I think he's safer than Danny is. Because Danny is more on a hot seat in the sense that they're already taking a chance on him. He's already someone that had his prime time with Red Bull too. And I'm not saying that Danny's a bad driver, but Danny's even admitted that he still needs to get back into it. He's not at where he once was. And then you have someone like Liam Lawson, who is starting to get into his prime because that kid is kicking ass and he's only just starting. And then you have Yuki, who is finally starting to get a balance with the team and the car and racing. And it's like, they just invested so much time into this kid that they're like, we'll probably give him a couple more years. So I feel like he's safe for a couple more years. And then if he's still not doing what they want him to do, which, by the way, I don't think that a team should have 2 top placers. I don't know why. I feel like it never works well. I feel like it just ruins the team's like strategies, and then you have people competing against their teammate again, instead of the other teams, and we see that all the time. I think sometimes it makes sense to have like a top 5er and then like a top 10er. You're still getting points either way, and they're not going to be trying to kill each other all the time. So I feel like if you were to put Liam Lawson and Yuki, that makes sense. I don't know why it makes sense, but to me it makes sense. And if you see like this race weekend, it worked out pretty well for Alpha Tauri. So no, I think if it works again well for them in Suzuka, they might actually say, let's pair up Liam and Yuki.
Honestly, just want Yuki to actually be able to complete at least 1 lap of the race, because he's had horrible luck with first the engine failing in Monza and then just getting whacked by Perez in that opening lap in Singapore. Because it's hard to even kind of compare Yuki to, Daniel or Liam, just because there haven't been many races where both drivers complete the race. So hopefully in Japan, it's his home race, so he can, do his thing, complete the race. But Liam does have an advantage there in that he's racing in Super Formula, and they race at Suzuka in Super Formula. So he does have some experience with this track coming up next. But also, I'm pretty sure everyone would riot if Danny Rick missed Coda. So that's probably the goal, is that he's back by Coda.
Then again, Red Bull has always been known to operate this way. If you're not picking up stuff fast, you're out. I mean, we saw it in, 2019 with Pierre? And then with Alex after 2020. So, but at the same time, I get why they're doing it, because at the end of the day, it's a business. And they just want to win.
That's kind of why I hope that eventually Yuki will break free from Red Bull. I honestly think if he paired up with Alex at Williams, because they're actually really close, like Alex kind of like mentors him and actually gave Yuki his new shoes that he just released. And they seem like they're really good friends. They're always, seen talking to each other. And I think Yuki just, needs some like support that's not, cutthroat Red Bull craziness. And maybe getting away from that would help him, improve with like the consistency part of things. But with Red Bull, it's like you're constantly worried if you're going to have a job next race or not. Not even like next season, like the next race. So that can't be good for your psyche at all.
I feel like Red Bull is just a very intense team. And if you compare it to another team like Williams, they have much different expectations from their drivers. With Red Bull, you can get second place, and it's good, but they're going to expect more out of you. With Williams, you can get seventh, and you are going to be extremely congratulated, and you are going to be honed as a really good driver, mostly because you did it in Williams. But I guess that's kind of the other factor. Red Bull's car right now, if you're not winning in Red Bull's car, it looks a little funny because their main driver, Max Verstappen, is winning every other weekend. And I feel like if we don't keep that in mind when we talk about these drivers, we are just not really being honest with ourselves. Red Bull is intense. You have to be an intense kind of person to want to be there.
Yeah, Red Bull takes a very specific driver to thrive in their environment, or a specific driver at a specific stage in their life, such as Seb between 2010 and 15 or 14. And I mean, honestly, I want to say Seb and Red Bull was a different human being to the Seb we know today.
I was going to say that could be compared to like saying Seb with Ferrari is a completely different person from Seb with Red Bull.
Yeah. Which is true.
I'm cringing at myself for this joke, but while he's cooking it up on the grid, Yuki is also cooking it up off the grid. And in this case, I just also want to talk about, because we talked about everything else. Like we talked about who he is on the grid, like how he got here, his career. But if there's one thing I'm kind of also looking forward to is where Yuki's going to end up after his F1 career. And I really do think it's going to be in the kitchen in his own restaurant, which if you've seen any of Yuki's interviews, he somehow always brings up food. And I think it's one of the funniest and also most wholesome things about him.
I mean, the man literally, when asked what he wants to be, he said, have his own restaurant. Not F1 champion, but have his own restaurant. When everyone else said F1 champion. And I'm like, get this man into a kitchen or get him a restaurant. I mean, even his current coach, Michael Italiano, says he usually plans out where they're going to eat whenever they're traveling to GP so that Yuki stays motivated to train.
And honestly, I think Yuki needs to enter his like food influencer era. We need food reviews for all of these restaurants at all of these races. Like he's getting a global food experience, and we need to know like what's good. I feel like I would trust his opinion on whether or not like a food was good. And it's like he would love it, like everyone else would love watching him just eat food and like review it. So but I could also see him with the Honda connection trying out IndyCar. I think it would be a blast. It's super chill over at IndyCar, and he could curse to his heart's content. And then also just eat his way across America. Food road trip as well. But I just think that could be fun, you know?
Actually, now that you said, because IndyCar, you're right. It's a fun series. I think he could do well there. I see him being friends with like Arrow McLaren and things. But what about WEC? No, I'm sorry, not WEC, WRC. like World Rally, that man would have so much fun launching himself around in those like forest tracks. And I feel like that's the kind of high strung energy that would do well with like his energy. Because yes, Yuki does get really focused in the races and like he gets really quiet sometimes, and that's why he doesn't like people bothering him. But I feel like if he had an outlet where he could be screaming like right, that man would have a blast. A blast. So yes to the restaurant, but actually you're right. I want to see him keep racing. That sounds so funny. I want to see him at Indy too.
Or what about monster trucks? Because remember when he raced Max with a monster truck and actually won against Max?
The only thing I could think of when I saw that video, if you've seen the Mario Kart movie, when they all get their carts and Toad rolls up with like this giant monster truck, like that's all I can think of when I saw Yuki in that thing.
I mean, honestly, when I saw the monster trucks and then Yuki standing next to it, I was like, oh Jesus, how is he gonna get up there? Because that man's short and monster trucks are not tiny. But thankfully he managed somehow.
Yeah, I think seeing that short man jump into a monster truck would make me giggle very, very loudly. So, Red Bull, if you want to put him in there again and then just get that for TikTok, please. However, we have talked so much about Yuki today, and honestly, I'm really glad we got to do a spotlight on him because he's one of my faves. But Ito has this quote that we need to share with you because we think it describes him perfectly.
So when doing research about Yuki and like the stuff he said, like his driver radios, etc., I came across this quote where it says, so into turn one, I just trusted Fernando's skill and just launched it. You know, like a rookie in overtaking Fernando Alonso. And honestly, that sums him up perfectly because A, it is honest, because we know him to be a blunt king. And B, it also shows that he admires the older generation and wants to learn from them.
And I love those older generation homies on the track. You guys definitely are keeping the kids in check because Yuki needs it. But I, for one, love all of these driver spotlights. And, it really gives us an opportunity to learn more about how these guys got on the track and where they might end up. But let us know what you think about Yuki on our socials. Is he one of your favorites? Do you think he's going to be off the grid next year on it? I honestly want to know your thoughts. Everywhere, we are the Paddock Girls Podcast, except on Twitter. There, you can find us at Paddock Girls Pod. As always, don't forget to rate, review, and share the podcast wherever you listen from, like Apple, Spotify, and TikTok. Thanks for joining us in the paddock today. See you in Suzuka. Bye, Craig.
See you, Craig.
Hi, Craig.